All right, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. Let's kick this off. We're on track 2, so there is a channel for that on Discord, so you can hop onto there now. And for the next couple, 3 slides or so, I'm introducing myself in this talk. Go ahead and scribble down words, phrases, whatever that have just tripped you up when you've read or listened to something InfoSec related. And if it's something that you now understand because you looked it up, still fine. Go ahead and write it down. With luck, and this will be pure luck, I am not a mind reader, I will have anticipated some of your questions. If not, we have a terrific starter for the Q&A period. And there is no such thing as something that's wrong or silly or too basic or any of that. This is totally a one-on-one space. So real quick, who am I? I'm a librarian. I am an educator at the University of Wisconsin-Madison Information School. I'm a preservationist, which is actually kind of how I got into InfoSec. I'm a privacy researcher, and I am also a speaker. I teach a broad selection of technology and ethics related courses to undergraduates and graduate students, and there's places you can find out more about me. But the important thing is I'm very, very, very new to InfoSec. How did I get to InfoSec? Since Ian talked about this as well, I got there through the standard librarian's interest in privacy. Privacy is just a librarian thing. And I'm also a specialist in digital preservation, and digital preservation, taking care of digital things is uses a lot of techniques and tools straight out of digital forensics. And yes, I will define digital forensics for you in just a moment. So if you are here wondering whether you can stump me, whether you can throw me a word or a phrase that I will not know, I will make it easy for you. You probably can. It's not going to be funny, though. I am just going to admit it, and we will move on. So what is jargon? What do I mean when I say this word? Jargon is just vocabulary that is specialized to or for or by, sometimes all of these, a particular community that is not broadly understood outside that community. And we could be talking about a professional community, just like InfoSec, or for that matter, librarianship. These communities are often called communities of practice. Could also be a community of choice, such as a hobby community. Lots and lots of communities have jargon. And jargon is not bad. I am not saying that jargon is a bad thing. Specialized vocabulary speeds up communication, and once you're used to it, it makes communication more precise. But the reason I put in a proposal for this talk today is that I found that jargon of any kind in any community can be a barrier to new folks. And because Ian mentioned this as well, sometimes this can be intentional, and I'm not a huge fan of that. But even when it's unintentional, it's hard to feel like you belong when you don't speak the language. So information security is full of jargon. There's lots of jargon. My least favorite thing about the jargon is that a lot of it is kind of borrowed from military and intelligence communities, which I don't love, but I live with it. I will not even be able to get through all of the jargon I have picked up as a relative newbie today. I will get as far as I can, 20, 25 minutes, then post my slides, including the slides that I left out of this talk, kill your darlings, as they say. That will be on my speaker deck, and I will post a link to that in the slides channel and in the track 2 channel on Discord as well. I will be around all day on the IntroSecCon Discord, and I'm also on Twitter. It is totally fine to ask me stuff, and it's fine to DM me as well. So when I had my talk accepted, I was invited to the IntroSecCon Discord, and this is from earlier this week, so the list is a little bit different from this now. But I was looking at this list and saying, right, just in the list of channels, I'm already kind of seeing some InfoSec jargon. So let's start here. Let's just start with this list of text channels, and we'll start from the bottom up. What is threat hunting? Something that Elmer Fudd would say. It is not the same as threat modeling. All right, threat modeling roughly means risk assessment in information security. What are the risks to your particular systems and people? Threat hunting is different. Threat hunting is going beyond a very common and normal and ordinary approach to security, which is set up a whole bunch of security systems and wait for them to tell you that something is weird or not quite right. The problem with this is that it will not always protect you. If there is a threat that's brand new, or it's just unfamiliar, your systems don't know about it, or it's really, really extra clever, your systems will not necessarily notice it. So threat hunting is going a little bit above and beyond that. You go actively looking for weird stuff, unexplained stuff happening on your systems. It is sometimes, not always, done with machine learning tools. And what a machine learning tool can do that can be hard for a set of human beings is to look for users on your systems, like users you already know about, who are just doing something that's out of character for them. All right, they're poking around systems that they wouldn't normally, or something like that. And this can be a sign that it's not the user, it is an attacker who has broken into the user's account, and just the security systems have not picked up on it yet. Digital forensics, I promised I was going to talk about this, now I'm talking about this. Digital forensics is a set of tools and techniques for gathering trustworthy evidence related to a security incident, such as a breach or an attack. You might need this evidence in court if you press charges against someone. You certainly want the evidence so that you can figure out what happened in your systems and prevent it next time. But digital forensics are the tools and techniques you would use to gather that evidence. Another interesting word is attribution. You can think of it as whodunit for a security incident. There's several flavors of digital forensics. There's media forensics, which is what I personally am most familiar with, and that's gathering evidence from physical storage devices such as hard drives, SD cards, even floppy diskettes if you're really old school, which I am. There's also memory forensics, which isn't always possible, but when it is, you can get information that you can't get any other way from that, and that's gathering evidence from the device's memory, the RAM or equivalent. Network forensics, of course, is, figuring out what's going on with your network traffic, your network logs. Mobile forensics is exactly what it sounds like. Cloud forensics is a thing. It's a particularly difficult thing, and I'm laughing at it because it's doing forensics on devices that you, as a security professional, do not actually control. So it can get a little ticklish, but still, there can definitely be evidence in the cloud that you need to deal with a particular incident. Next up, red teaming and blue teaming were the two channels in the Discord, and that gets us to penetration testing and jargon related to that. I want to stop with the CIA real quick. You'll hear that acronym thrown around a lot, and it does not mean the Central Intelligence Agency, not in information security. It is shorthand for an information security model that suggests how you know that a system is or is not secure. You assess it on three criteria. There's the C, which is confidentiality, which is more or less do only the people who should have access to this information actually have access to it. When there's a data breach, that is a failure of confidentiality. The I is for integrity. And the question you're asking there is, is the information in the system unaltered from its intended state? If, for example, somebody, defaces the front page of your website, completely messes up your homepage, that is a failure of integrity, right? The attacker has changed information that they should not have been able to change. The A is availability. And the question here is, can the system do what it needs to do for those who need the system to do those things? When an attacker, a distributed denial of service attacker, whatever, brings the system down, that is a failure of availability. That raises the question, how do you know? How can you know that your systems are CIA secure? And just to be clear about this, system, when an information security professional uses the word system, they may be referring to a technology system like a database management system or whatever. But more often, the word system carries a broader meaning not just the technology, but the people, the design, the processes, all of that stuff. But returning to my question, how do you know that your systems are secure? You can't. For a system that's complicated, for any system that includes people, you cannot know that they are secure. But you can at least stress test them and see what happens. And that is what penetration testing is about. You'll often, I mean, almost always hear this abbreviated to pen testing. Penetration testing is a prearranged attempt to break into a system aimed at roughly two things: testing whether you're doing the things that you should be doing, complying with best practices, and locating any weak spots in your system before a genuine attacker can do it. So red teams, blue teams, and purple teams in a penetration test. The red team are the pseudo attackers. They're not really trying to hurt you, but they are trying to break into the system. You will also hear the word red teamer used almost synonymously with pen tester. Red teamers may be an organization's own security employees. Commonly, though, they are contractors. The blue team are the system's defenders who are trying to keep the red team out. These are almost always the organization's own security people. Not commonly, but sometimes you'll see a purple team referred to. That's a situation where your red team and your blue team are actually working together to find those holes in the system and do something about them. A little bit more pen testing jargon: white, gray, and black box pen testing. This is shorthand for how much does a pen tester know about the system before the pen test starts. If they have all the system schematics, they know everything there is to know, that's a white box pen test. If they're not told anything at all and they have to find out everything on their own, that's a black box pen test, and gray is a kind of in between. Physical pen testing, you don't just necessarily, again, test the technology. You can pen test a physical facility. It's gates, doors, locks, security systems, security procedures, definitely testing the people, right? So that is a thing. For both network and physical pen testing, a very common technique is social engineering, which just means conning people into making security mistakes. How does a pen test work? Pretty much the same way as an attack would work. Step one is what's called recon, short for reconnaissance, which means looking around to find out what you can. Step two is scanning. Typically happens over the network, locating as many devices, as much software on the target's network and systems as possible, so you can decide where to attack. Once you know what systems are there, you try to get into them. Once you're in, you may migrate, which is hopping from one system over, or device or network, into another. You will very commonly try to what's called escalate your privileges, which means gaining additional power to do things on or to a system. And while you're in, you try to persist yourself, meaning you avoid getting kicked off the system. And you obfuscate yourself, which means hiding your presence from the blue team, the defenders. And finally, if you're good and the blue team can't quite stop you, you get the loot, which is the goal of the pen test. Now, there's a Capture the Flag event going on today alongside Track 1 and Track 2. If you don't know what a Capture the Flag is, it's kind of a pen testing game. Not every Capture the Flag is set up exactly like a pen test, but a lot of them are. The idea is that you try to accomplish certain pen testing-like goals in a system that is deliberately set up to make those goals achievable, if not easy. And it's for practice, right? It's for practicing the techniques that you would normally use, both in attack and defense. All right, moving on to talk about the bad stuff. Bugs, patches, vulnerabilities, and exploits. A bug is simply a mistake in software code or hardware behavior, so that the software or hardware is not behaving as intended. A vulnerability is a special kind of bug. It is a bug that is a security problem for a given piece of hardware or software. Now, there's lots of bugs in all software. Bugs are just a thing. Lots of bugs have nothing whatever to do with security. So all vulnerabilities are bugs, but not all bugs are actually vulnerabilities. A patch is a programmed fix for a bug. So when somebody says patch your systems, they're saying install the fixes. A security patch is a patch that specifically fixes vulnerabilities. An exploit is a security attack that leverages a particular vulnerability. There's a kind of exploit that you'll hear called a 0-day, or if they're spelling it out in full, a 0-day exploit. This is an exploit that is so new that there's no patch for the vulnerability that's being exploited. In fact, for many 0 days, the good folks or the owners of the software may not even know that the vulnerability exists. So 0-day exploits are very, very, very dangerous. So this one actually tripped me up when I was a newbie. The word compromise. I'm used to hearing this in the context of negotiating. We'll agree on something that's okay for everybody. No, not in InfoSec. In information security, a compromise, which you'll hear used as both a verb and a noun, but it's a successful attack on someone or something's security. So if you hear that Eve compromised Alice's email, that means Eve attacked Alice's email account successfully, and she probably read Alice's email when she should not have, or at least should not have been able to. If you read in a news story, there are thousands of compromised systems. That means that we know that thousands of systems have been successfully attacked. There's a slang term, pwn, which is a synonym for compromise. The verb is usually pwn, the noun is usually pwning, and this comes from gaming, where to own someone is to thoroughly defeat them, and P is next to own on the keyboard, so O on the keyboard, so you see how that happened. I want to talk a little bit more about social engineering briefly, because there's lots of different kinds of it, but some of them have jargon associated. Commonest jargon you'll see around social engineering is the word phishing with a PH. And this is conning somebody into doing something that they shouldn't, usually by email, not always, but usually. Variants on phishing are spear phishing, which is instead of sending a spam fish to everybody and their sibling, with spear phishing, you're phishing a specific person and you're crafting the email very carefully to make it as likely as possible that that person will actually click on it. There's catfishing, which is phishing using romance as the hook. I had a family member who got caught in a catfishing thing and it was awful and I don't want to talk about it. It's just evil. And then there is smishing, which is the same as phishing, just instead of email, you use text message or SMS. Business email compromise, BEC. This is a term I want you to know because it's one of the biggest causes of business losses in all of information security. All right. Usually, a business email compromise happens by spear phishing somebody in an organization who controls the money. And that doesn't necessarily mean the big boss. All right. It could mean the big boss's executive assistant. It could mean the human resources person, could be somebody in the finance or accounting department. There's lots of people that it's worth spear phishing if you're trying to scam money out of a business. The exploitation modes here, there's lots of them. Fake invoices, usually fake late invoices so that people feel urgent about paying them. Gift card requests from the boss, I've seen that one quite a bit. Requests for confidential employee information, often tax related, as a starting point toward identity theft. There's lots of horrible things you can do once you convince somebody to take the emails seriously. And then there's 419 scams. I have lots of money, but I need you to give me some. Yeah, a lot of you have probably seen those, but may not have known what they were called. So now you do. Malware. Malware is an umbrella term for software, for code that is intended to mess with a system or harm its security. There are lots of kinds of malware. I could have spent this entire talk on malware and I would have no shortage of things to tell you. What I like to do instead is give you a taxonomy, because there are characteristics of malware that are often used to kind of classify it. Thing one is what the malware targets. So you'll hear about Windows malware or Android malware or browser malware. How the malware spreads or how it infects targets. This is where we get into viruses versus worms versus Trojans, and I'm not even going there. And then there's finally what they do. And typically that will be a word with ware on the end. So ransomware or adware or spyware. While you're new, I'm not sure it makes a whole lot of sense to memorize all these things. Figure it out when you need to. However, there are a couple of kinds of ware that I do want you to know about. One is ransomware, which is malware that encrypts your data, locks it up, and asks you to pay to unlock it. All right. More recent ransomware strains are also stealing data, and the InfoSec jargon for stealing data is exfiltrating it. There's also spyware, which is malware that reports out somewhere on activities performed on a particular device, usually without the device users knowing. A kind of, spyware is a keylogger, which is spyware that sends every keystroke you type, including on a mobile so-called keyboard, somewhere it should not be. There's also malware that adds endpoints, and an endpoint is just an end user device, that is all it is, to what are called botnets. A botnet is a group of devices, often a very large group of devices, that has been compromised, and we know this word now, such that an external device, often called a command and control server, which can be abbreviated either as C2 or CNC, and the command and control server makes the compromised devices do bad things, like send spam or try to overwhelm a website. Advanced persistent threats. This is a giant buzzword, and I don't like buzzwords. Jargon is okay, buzzwords not so much. So originally, an APT was a targeted threat from an extremely well-resourced, well-trained actor. We're talking on the level of entire countries. And it's the kind of threat where they don't stop. If something doesn't work, they will try something else. Of late, this term has been broadened to pretty much any threat coming from anywhere that's a little too difficult for relatively ordinary prevention efforts to actually prevent. A little bit on your systems, and I might actually get through this whole deck. Amazing. So an endpoint, as I said, is a single computing device that's under a given security system's purview. Could be anything, any kind of gadget. The word visibility is another one that gave me fits when I was new to this. It just means, can a security person diagnose what's going on with or inside the endpoint? So if they say something like, we don't have visibility into this endpoint storage, that means we can't figure out what data is on this device, not unlikely because it's encrypted. Defenses. Firewall is like the wall around a castle. It's a defense against exploits originating from outside your organization. Defense in depth is just, don't just have a firewall. A firewall can't prevent everything. If something gets past the firewall, you're screwed. If the firewall gets pwned, or if an attack comes from the inside, the firewall is not going to stop it. So you need more defenses, such as intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems, IDS, IPS. These are pretty much what they sound like. An IDS tries to notice exploits and warn you about them, and IPS actually tries to prevent them. Logs. Logs are just records that a given software, program, or system keep about what happens to it. There are lots of logs in any complicated system. So a class of software has arisen called a Security Information Event Management System, or a SIEM. This is one-stop log analysis shopping. They collect all the logs, they try to analyze all the logs, they give you nice reports on what's happening in your system. All right, and that's what I've got, and yay, we have 5 minutes for questions. Casey, tell me what I missed.
Well, that was great. First of all, let me turn my camera back on.
Yeah.
I don't see any official questions at this point, which is a good sign. That means we're awesome. And let me pull up the Discord and confirm that there are no questions.
If there's nothing else, as I said, I will be around all day. If anything occurs to you, please hit me up. I love to answer questions.
I don't think there's any of, do you recommend any introductory, maybe like SOC analyst courses? I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse, but that's officially.
Not super in my wheelhouse. I would go ahead and ask that question in the LobbyCon channel, because I bet they will have lots and lots of, frankly, I got the technical knowledge that I have of InfoSec, I got at the local community college, right? Check out what they offer. It may be absolutely outstanding.
I know we have a talk coming up in a little bit. I believe it's in this track covering like network packet analysis, and that's a lot of stuff we'll do like in a SOC environment. You'll do a lot of like reading logs and analyzing network traffic. So definitely like stick around for the day, obviously. But yeah, and I would recommend maybe asking that in the maybe LobbyCon channel or one of the ones about blue teaming.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if there's no further questions, thank you so much, Dorothy.
Yeah, so glad to do this. And hi, everybody. Good to meet you all.